everyone, welcome to our channel. I'm Kate.
And I'm Stephanie.
And together we're Three Heads. If you're joining us from our podcast, answers may vary. We're so glad you want to know more about timing. It seems insignificant, but it's not. It's so important.
And ultimately, it saves you so much time and stress in the long run to take that time at the beginning.
For sure. For sure. If you just stumbled across us on YouTube, welcome. We hope that you like what you see and what you hear. If you want to know more about us, we have included all of the relevant links in the description box for you. So let's go ahead and get started talking about timings.
Yes, and we're talking here a little bit, it stems from our discussion of how to plan a unit, but there's some stuff in here about how to plan out your whole year as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the calendarer of our group, and
Sure
I always start by at the beginning of the year, I set up our calendar and just block in what are the holidays, what are the duty days off, what are the weird schedules that I'm aware of. If we have a classroom routine, like on Mondays we read, I go ahead and mark that on the Mondays, just so that whenever we get to a unit, I kind of know what I'm working with, and I'm not surprised by a modified day or a 4-day weekend or something like that.
Yeah, and some schools are really good at getting those calendars out to you at the beginning of the year, you know, when all the assemblies are going to be. Some schools are not so good at that, and so it comes more with experience.
Yes.
But definitely, if there was an assembly last year, there's probably going to be an assembly this year too.
Yes.
And if you're not sure, I always admire the fact that you reach out to the administrator or the counselors who coordinate those kind of activities. They're probably like, what does she care what's going on in November? But it's always super helpful to know.
I'll also sometimes put a day that's like, I know I might have to move it, but I know that day will get taken from us around that time of year.
For sure.
Along with that, I like to think through kind of a rough idea of what our year needs to look like. So how many units do we need to fit into each semester? If we've taught the class before, okay, how long did everything take last year? Did it work? Do we need to adjust the timing? If it's a new class, okay, what seems like an appropriate number of units per semester to get through? And it's not set in stone, but it gives us kind of an idea of like, all right, well, we can't take 12 weeks on this because we have something else we need to do.
Or we'll just go nuts.
That too, as was the case with the unit we talked about in our podcast. And then this kind of comes after we talked in our podcast on the blog about the steps for a successful first planning session. And really, when you get down to the unit level, this comes after that because you have your list now of everything you would like to do with the book. This doesn't really work until you kind of have that list ready to go. And then I look at the reading. We're English teachers, so usually our unit planning comes with reading. And I make sure that it's divided into chunks, whether that's a group of chapters, an act for a play, a group of poems, whatever it is. And then I check the audio. So we started moving away from having students do reading outside of class, which is a whole other topic we will discuss another time. But we did a lot of reading in class. So I would just check the audio and see, oh, okay, like it's going to take us about this long to get through that. When we do have, especially like honors students read, I try to think of like, okay, what's 30 to 60 minutes-ish of reading so that it's not an overwhelming amount of time. But it's good to know how long-ish it should take to get through the content.
And I think usually that's the point at which you bring somebody else in to look at and see what do they think.
Especially because I read fast, so what I think is 30 minutes of reading is not always what everyone else thinks is 30 minutes of reading.
Yeah. And sometimes, like with the Romeo and Juliet unit, that is the basis of the podcast that we talked about this. For me, it wasn't until we got started that I was like, whoa, wait a second. I thought this was going to be okay. It wasn't okay. But, you know, those kind of things happen. But you want to, as best as possible, sort of
try to
have this idea. Good.
And then what I always do then is I go through and I block out, if we do everything we came up with at our planning session, how is that going to look? I try to think, all right, and it gets easier the later in the year when you know your students better, how long will it take them to do this activity? And at this stage, it's definitely, well, at every stage, it's better to overestimate, because it's great to finish your unit early and realize, we had that happen with our sophomores this year where we were using the same pacing as last year, and it was like, well, this is just ridiculous. Like, let's wrap this up and move on. But that's a lot easier problem to fix than realizing you have raced through something that then you don't have time to expand.
For sure.
One thing I also like to look at this stage is, what are the due dates? Is it too much for them? Do they have 6 assignments due in 1 week? Did it break up weird over a weekend? What is our grading going to look like? Do we have, oh my gosh, we're going to have to give feedback on 4 assignments back to back? Like, all right, we got to figure out a way to work around that.
We also allow our students to do revisions of things. So in terms of like, will I have commented on their first assignment and they'll be working on the revisions while also starting on the second assignment? You want to make sure that you have that timed out correctly, because if you're offering them the opportunity to do revisions, but you're not going to be able to comment in time, then you're going to create a backup. You could also create the other situation, which is you're commenting on something that is kind of irrelevant, or they're going to have made the mistake for 3 other assignments because you didn't plan it out for them to be able to make the corrections and apply them going forward, besides just revising their response.
And that's, again, something you get better at the more you teach and the more you do it. And then once we've kind of got that, we look at it and I tell Kate, I say, all right, well, it's going to take us 10 weeks to get through this unit. And Kate goes, too long. And this is where you just think about, do I have that much time? Do I want to spend that much time? Are we spending an insane amount of time on like a short story or something like that, where it just doesn't merit that much time? And then what I always do when we hit that point is, first I look, did I overestimate? Like, did I give 3 days to something that could be done in 1 or 2? Did I make a whole period for something that's really a half period activity? And then I look at what our options are, and it's a combination, and usually Kate and I work together during this part, but it becomes a question of, okay, well, what was our end goal? We talk in our other podcast about, or not our other podcast, the full podcast about, like having an angle and an end goal in mind. And so then we can be like, oh, well, we thought it would be really fun to have a creative storyboard activity, but maybe that doesn't serve the end goal, so that can go. It also affects how we create the assignment. So sometimes we have to change the delivery method. Like, we don't have 4 days for this, so how do I make sure they get the same thing in 1 or 2 days? And so it's really helpful to think through all of this at the beginning, because then as we get into the nitty gritty, it kind of gives us some guide rails of like how to structure an assignment, or how crazy to go with it and pare back, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I have to say, timing is not everybody's like cup of tea or their strength. It is not my strength to come up with the calendar of events. I can come in and say, I think that's too much time. I don't think that's enough time. That part I am fairly in tune with, but the actual calendaring it out, like, that takes a little bit of self-discipline. It takes a little bit of like forward thinking. Stephanie, I know that you sort of roughly map out an entire semester, right?
Yeah.
So you will say, okay, this is how much time we have to spend on our last unit, our second unit, our part A and B of our first unit. That's usually how we do it, is like an A and B longer first unit.
Yeah.
A second unit, and then a third unit.
Yeah. And I think that's, and it used to be shorter back with the old standards, but as we've kind of gone to more full text topical units, we tend to do, about 2 to 3 3 per semester.
Yeah.
And then we also have 6-week grading periods, so that works out that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we taught before, I really like to try to do day by day for the full semester at once, because then it's a lot easier to make those adjustments and see what we need. When we taught a new class, I at least was kind of like, all right, let's aim for about 6 weeks for each unit that we're going to do. So that just kind of keeps us from accidentally spending the whole semester on one text and missing the others.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think that's really important. And as you said at the beginning, you're doing yourself a disservice and causing yourself stress if you don't do this, and you're certainly doing a disservice to your students if you don't do this. Sort of sit down and at the beginning of the semester, sort of map out, okay, this is like, I have to have it done by this day. And if you really sort of stay true to that, you will figure out ways to make things fit, but also be realistic about, is this an appropriate amount of time to spend on something?
And this is where the value of collaboration comes in, because if you're new, then you have people who can say, oh, that's not realistic. If you're not new and you're just working together, you have different just ways of doing things yourself. And so it's easy to kind of, okay, let's get some feedback, and respectful when you learn that, like, oh, okay, well, I talk really fast. So Kate is always saying, I don't have enough time, slow down. And so I try to keep that in mind and say, okay, if we're going to stay on the same page, I got to give some space here.
Yes. I need speaking breathing room. If you have any questions about timings, because I know that this is something that is challenging for many of us. I know if I were watching Stephanie, I would be like, I have questions. Feel free to pop those in the comments down below. We would love to talk to you about it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's fun. It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Let's not get carried away. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye.
Bye. And if you just stumbled across us on YouTube, welcome. Thank you. Congratulations.
You're doing so good.
Ron. Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.